stupid face. What? What did I say?
You must not slap anyone until your training is complete.
I just kind of want to talk about how adorable New Spring looks. Like, look how tiny this book is compared to the other behemoths in this series. Okay, so New Spring is the prequel novel to the Wheel of Time set, like roughly 17 or 18 years before The Eye of the World. And for my spoiler-free section, I kind of just want to talk about my stance with prequels and my overall opinion of this book. I'm not always the biggest fan of prequels because they tend to overindulge. They tend to overindulge with the opportunity to retcon some of the stories and plant seeds for the future storylines. Are like, oh, this was planned all along, or they would do that thing where it's like, oh, this very specific event that happened in the main series. Well, that happened because so and so in the prequel set this up and whatnot. And I don't really like that stuff. Like, just leave stuff as it is, right? And I have this problem with a lot of authors, whether it's a prequel or a prelude or an in-between book or whatnot. They always tend to do this. Even some great authors like Brandon Sanderson even does this, and I never really like it. However, New Spring doesn't do this. New Spring is focused on being its own thing, but also is very heavily tied into the main story within the Wheel of Time. However, those tie-ins are very much already made aware within the main series itself. And overall, I really like this novel. This was a really fun novel. Because it's so short, it's so fast, it moves so well, and I'm constantly, flicking pages, reading chapters. It wasn't until this book that I realized just how much I missed Moiraine. Like, I really missed that character, and it was so great. It felt like coming back to home. It felt like coming back to home, reading Moiraine again. I got a sense of nostalgia there. It was all pretty great stuff. Now, let's talk about the spoiler review, because I want to shorten down my spoiler-free stuff. This is the story of Moiraine Damodred and also how she met Lan Mandragoran. But before that, we get a young Moiraine and a young Moiraine and Swan in the White Tower as accepted, and their story just opens off with a banger. So we get that scene that was, I think it was in the Great Hunt when, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was in the Great Hunt when Swan met Ran for the first time. I think it was that when she met Ran for the first time, and then Moiraine told Ran that the Keeper, at the time when them two were accepted, had a foretelling that the dragon was reborn, and then she just dropped dead. And this was when they were accepted, and nobody knew apart from the current Amyrlin and them. I believe it was the dragon, not the dragon reborn, the Great Hunt that was there. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we see that scene, and it's awesome. It's amazing. I love the fact that we see a scene that we got hints to in the main series, and we actually see it, and it's as cool as Moiraine described. It really perfectly sets up the motivations for why Swan and Moiraine were so desperate to find the Dragon Reborn, because they were the only two people who knew it, and you really get a sense of how important this is. And it's not just, because they knew it, they have to find him. Because of all the threat within the tower that this moment caused. The Amyrlin that was currently there was assassinated, is what we believe. Multiple people who were set out to look for the Dragon Reborn were killed. A lot of, sitters and keepers and whatnot. And obviously the current Amyrlin at that time very subtly sets out this method to discover the Dragon Reborn by finding every child that was born right after the Isle War ended, right? And they would pay some money to the family and the mothers as kind of just a celebration or whatnot. But it's in reality, it's masking the true intention, which is to find the Dragon Reborn. That whole stuff, great. It was very well written. The motivations make so much more sense now. The reason why Swan and Moiraine kept this so quiet and kept this a secret is made much more clearer before this book. And this book actually does what prequels should do, which is improve upon the main story. besides the connections to the main story, I just really love this book. I really love seeing a young Moraine, a young Swan, just in the White Tower. It has this real slice of life quality as we see them get up to their hijinks, whether it's throwing pranks at people and getting up to various shenanigans, seeing familiar faces like Sheriam and whatnot, and Varen, who is Aes Sedai. And it's really cool because, we're so used to all these characters being ageless and being of the same age. But now we get a deep insight of, who was in a closer age range with Moraine and Shuan, and who was actually much older. So people like Aleda was already Aes Sedai when Moiraine was accepted. And we see Aleda's always been a even back then, so that was great. Like that scene where Aleda started whacking up Moraine and Swan to prepare them for the Aes Sedai test. Like, man, what a just coming back to this setting when the White Tower was a unified place is really great to see. I missed that whole, magical school setting. I also really love some of the parallels Shuan and Moraine have with Nynaeve and Gwen's time in the tower, and there's a lot of similarities between those characters, which makes sense because those that group is so ingrained with each other, right? And in general, I love reading this because Moraine and Shuan are like my two favorite characters from the Wheel of Time. So just seeing an entire book about them in their days in the White Tower was awesome. And we also finally see the test for gaining the shawl. So we've seen the accepted test with Nynaeve and Gwen, but we've never seen the Aes Sedai test, right? And it's a pretty brutal test where they have to do like 100 different weaves while under great stress. We see Moiraine go through this kind of what like Nynaeve went through in the Terangria portal, where we're seeing a bunch of threats come like Trollocs and whatnot, and there's this emotional confrontation she has to have with her father. It's very similar to the accepted test, except now they have to perform like 100 different weaves, and the whole point is to prove that their knowledge, their skill under stressful conditions. It was a great chapter. I really enjoyed the chapter. I really love the tests and examinations within fantasy series. What also surprised me is how invested I would be in Lan Mandragoran. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, Lan is like the most underused character in the Wheel of Time. Even if you're a big Wheel of Time fan, you've got to be honest. You've got to admit that Lan is so underused in the main series. But this book makes me more invested in Lan than any of the other books have in the Wheel of Time. I understand his struggle with being Malkia's heir. I understand his conflict with the Blight. I really empathize with him. And Lan, I wish we'd get more Lan perspectives in the Wheel of Time, because Lan's a really fun character to read in here. Seeing how he was very hostile towards Aes Sedai before meeting Moraine was great. Finally seeing that moment where Moraine and Lan meet with each other, and Lan chucks her in the pond, which was also, I think, set up in the Great Hunt. Once again, I really like the interactions between those two characters, even though we don't get much of it, because a large portion of this book is Moraine and Shuan in the tower, and then the last few sections is Moraine meeting Lan for the first time. But what we do get is really fun. I definitely do get this dynamic duo between them two. The rapport is great, and the actual confrontation with Dark Friends and the Black Arja at the end took some bold decisions, because Lan and Moraine essentially failed. They failed to save the people, right? I forgot her name, but the Lord and his son and that one woman fell off the balcony, right? And Moraine couldn't save them, any of them, in time. And they kind of just fell. And I love how in one of Moraine's earliest and first adventures didn't go as well or as we would normally see Moraine in the later books. Because this is a young Moraine. She's not adjusted to this. And I really like the decisions Jordan took here. However, I would have liked a bit more falling action. Some important people died in this book, and some of their relatives, like that one noble woman who was Lan's first love or something. I'm pretty sure her daughter died, right? So I would have liked to have seen more falling action with that, with maybe with a conversation with Lan or something. The length of this book is what is affecting from reaching its fullest potential, I'd say. I think this book definitely needed a bit more falling action. Otherwise, the ending felt very natural. I completely buy why Lan would accept Moiraine as an Aes Sedai and why he would agree to being her warder. And it was a solid introduction, and it was just a solid prequel. I really enjoyed it. I like how Jordan wasn't compelled to go bigger and try to retcon stuff. He kept it very simple. He did what he had to do. Saw no real breaks in continuities. The characters felt like themselves. And overall, a solid book. Also, I do want to say, I'm glad I didn't read this before. And a lot of the enjoyment that comes from this book is from having already read a lot of the Wheel of Time beforehand. And I decided to read it in publication order, which is why I read this after Crossroads of Twilight. And I think I definitely enjoyed this book much more because I read a lot of the Wheel of Time before and I'm already so familiar with this world and these characters that reading it, I can already tell it's probably not the best introduction to this world because Jordan doesn't spend time going to exposition and whatnot because at this point I think the people going to read this are the people who are like hardcore Wheel of Time fans, right? So I respect that decision, although I would say this is not a good introduction for the series. I'm glad I didn't read this at first because the whole point of the Eye of the World is to act as an introduction to this world. That is the entire purpose of that book. That's the entire reason why you should read the Eye of the World as the first book. I think this book could definitely be read maybe after like book 3 or 4. Anything after the first couple of books is fine, honestly. But otherwise, this was a solid book. I would give this a solid 7.5 out of 10. I enjoyed New Spring. I thought it was a pretty decent book. Anyway guys, tell me in the comment section what you think and thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video.